Hello, welcome back to my advanced composition or advanced writing class. Professor Kent Lee here. I'm going to talk about the genre analysis unit, the genre analysis assignment. So first you have some Google Forms to fill out, which will help you to get started, to generate some ideas. And it should send the contents back to you, what you write. And then we have the midterm essay, the genre analysis essay. Fun. Let's talk about that. So genre is type or kind. You're probably used to genre like literary genres and things like poetry, novels, different kinds of poetry, romantic poetry, different types of novels, things like that. Well, in academic writing, the field of academic writing and the study of academic writing, we also talk about genre as in different types of academic writing, what academic writing is like in this field or that field, in engineering versus chemistry versus philosophy or history or literature, or even different subfields, what it's like in this area of linguistics or that area of linguistics. So we're going to talk about the assignment and what you need to do. There's another video on the genre analysis project, which I might have you watch. It's an older video. It's a little less organized and systematic. So this video is going to just give you more of a systematic walkthrough of what you need to do the assignment, particularly the essay assignment. So first you're going to find, well, maybe for the Google Forms, at least one published research article. That will be enough for the first two Google Forms, or two research articles. But you definitely need two research articles for the essay assignment. And you're going to look at those and analyze them and describe or explain how people write papers like that. So published papers like in an academic research journal like this, those are sort of maybe the ideal sort of academic writing sample for this kind. So you're going to find a couple of research articles, published research articles. They're written in English from a domestic Korean journal or from an international journal. It should be in English. It should be not more than 30 pages in length. Ideally, maybe not even more than 20. Some articles do get kind of long, especially literature research articles. Should be something that you can more or less understand. Don't pick articles that are just completely over your head. Get something you can understand. You can go to the KCI website. That is kind of a government foundation that kind of oversees and helps with, the development and promotion of research in Korea and the publication of these various research journals in different fields. And so their search engine will give you results for research articles published by academic journals in Korea. So type in a general topic like poetry or something you're interested in. For this, you can pick articles that are from some particular field. It could be like the field in general, like literature, or theoretical linguistics, applied linguistics, language education. It could be business English. It could be media studies, culture, area studies. It could be some other thing that you're studying. If you're doing a major or minor in some other field, that's okay too. You could get two papers just from, anything in like literature research. Or it could be, if you want to, more focused, more specific, two articles that are both about, Shakespeare and poetry, or romantic poetry, or how or studies of English speakers learning Chinese as a second language, or two studies of Koreans learning English as a second language at the college level. Or it could just be two studies of language acquisition, two language learning studies, whatever. As long as they're kind of related, they're from the same field. So here by field, I mean not like an English major, but I mean a proper field of study like literature studies, linguistics research, language education, language policy, or culture studies, media studies, or something like that. You can also go to the RIS website. It gives you a lot of other results, things like master's theses, PhD dissertations, books. You don't want that. Just focus on research articles. Google Scholar will search international research websites, academic websites, and you can go to Google Scholar and again find publications, research articles published in international journals. These might be harder, probably better quality, maybe even some of the best in the field, but they may be harder. So whichever you like. So your topic, okay, how does one write an academic paper in your field? By field, again, I mean not your major, but your field of study, literature, linguistics, education, etc. You're going to examine some published scholarly papers, and you're going to base your essay on those papers. And you're going to cite the sources. You're going to have at least 2 published articles. You're going to cite those and refer to those in your essay. And you can kind of approach this essay from several different ways, several different perspectives or approaches, as I'll explain in a minute. But see the various questions and aspects in the book chapter on the genre analysis assignment. There are a number of different kinds of discussion questions to help you think. Some of them might be relevant. So take a look at those. There are a lot of actually discussion questions. When I did this unit in a regular classroom, we would kind of take it in stages, bit by bit. It's kind of hard to do in an online semester. But look at the questions, some of the guiding questions in the book for ideas. So one kind of approach, you could take it like one of these questions. Okay, how do writers present and develop their main arguments in the paper? You look at the paper and you look at how they develop their arguments. So for example, as I look at this, well, the person lays out, his or her research question near the beginning, gives some background information about the topic. And by looking at the previous research on the topic, the person identifies kind of a research question, something else that needs to be looked at, or something that needs to be looked at better. And the writer does that by explaining some of the weaknesses or problems of past research. And the writer presents her own idea, her own kind of research question or hypothesis. And then the writer says, okay, here's my study that I'm going to do. And this is how I did it. This is how I did this study. And the writer explains how she got some data, how she analyzed the data, the results of her analysis, and what kind of conclusions or implications those results lead to regarding her research question. That's kind of, and as you're going through this, you're looking at, okay, what kind of evidence does the writer present? In the beginning, what kind of evidence does the writer present for the need for this research question? Why does this study need to be done? As the writer analyzes the data and draws out maybe her conclusions, her implications, okay, what's the evidence for that? Based on her data, what's the evidence for her claims? What kind of claims does she make? What evidence does she present for that? Then she's going to compare her results with other people's results and argue that her results are sound or good, maybe even better than others, or they fit well with other people's results, their research. Well, how does she do that? How does she develop her ideas? How does she develop her arguments and her ideas throughout the paper? Another way to approach it is, okay, well, can you learn by looking at this literarily? As you look at, do a sort of a literary or linguistic analysis of this paper, what do you learn about that? As you look at the style, the structure, how, again, the writer develops his or her ideas and how it's organized, how the paper is organized. Or as you look at all of these questions, what insights do you get that you could share with maybe, a junior, someone younger than you in your department? You're not pretending to be an expert, but you're kind of playing the role as, hey, I looked at academic papers in this field, this is what I've learned, and this is what I can share with you. So imagine you're kind of just sharing with someone else insights on how people write academic papers, because what's maybe helpful for writing something in a journal, a research journal, can help you writing that paper in that research essay in your class, your third or fourth year class in literature analysis, or your third or fourth year linguistics class, or whatever. So how would you explain the process of academic writing? in this field. So in doing so, some different ways you can approach these questions. You don't have to, and probably shouldn't, look at all of these approaches, but find one or two that are kind of doable for you, for your paper, for your 3-page paper or so. You can look at the document structure. So some published research follows a fairly rigid structure. Abstract, that's kind of like a summary. That's important because when you search for articles online, well, that's what comes up in the search engines, the abstracts. Then an introduction, it identifies the issue, gives a little background. Then what's called the literature review. And by literature, I don't mean like novels and poetry, but here, when we say literature review, that's a special term. That means previously published research on the topic. So if you're writing a biology research paper, you might do a literature review, the previous literature or published research on this question in biology, or this question in linguistics, or this question in education. The writer examines the past research on this in order to identify, hey, here's a new research question, we need to look at this. The literature review often serves to identify the need for this current paper. Why do I need to write this paper? Well, here's a question we need to look at. The writer presents maybe an experiment or study or data, qualitative, quantitative, analysis and results of the data or experiment. What does it mean? The implications, the writer discusses it. What does this mean for my research question? How does this relate to other people's findings and their research? Now, you could be more of a theoretical paper, it could be more of a literature analysis paper. I mean, like someone doing literary analysis, literary criticism. It may not follow this structure, but it might have some of these elements. They discuss what previous scholars wrote about this. Let's say if it's a paper about a particular poet in her poetry, maybe the writer is going to look at, well, what have other scholars written about this topic, looking at the writer's life and looking at the poem, the lines of the poem, and what the writer's doing and how she's using language and things like that. And what does it mean? Well, what do you get out of it? How is this supposed to maybe affect the reader? What is this saying about the poet's life? What is she doing with language that's really cool here? Why is this interesting or important? Implications. You can look at the logical structure. Some papers will start with, most papers will have a thesis of some kind. Thesis being the main idea, the main point, the main argument of the whole paper. It could be a research hypothesis. If it is a quantitative study or more scientific paper, it will usually identify a research hypothesis somewhere at the beginning. This is my hypothesis, which I want to prove or disprove with my experiment, my data. It could be more exploratory. It could be a research question, especially in a theoretical or qualitative study. What's my research question? Well, I think that this poet is doing this and this and this in order to say this. Or it could be, this is my research question, maybe a general idea. I don't have a specific hypothesis, but what would happen if? A language study. What would happen if you did this in a classroom? Main arguments. So throughout the paper, there are going to be main arguments supporting this research question or hypothesis. What are the writer's main arguments? Where are they in the paper? How does the writer develop them? So this is my main thesis, and these are the main points in the paper. Well, this research says this research says that, my data say this, therefore, main arguments. So the writer lays out main arguments throughout the paper. Where are they? How are they expressed? How are they stated? How are they supported? What kind of evidence or support are given for these main arguments? And again, it could be research data, it could be qualitative data, it could be arguments based on a theory that they accept, that they've used, like in literary theory. It could be theoretical arguments and maybe some kind of evidence or support for these theoretical arguments. What's the evidence? What's the support? On what basis does the writer go from point A to point B to point C to kind of the conclusion, I've supported my thesis? What's the purpose of the thesis? Am I trying to prove something? Or am I just trying to show like my analysis of this novel is a good and valid one that makes sense, that adds something new to our understanding? It's not about proving it right, it's just, it's valid, it makes sense, it's helpful. So what's the nature of the logical argumentation? You know, is there like deductive argument, inductive argument? Is it more like this is the best option, kind of what we call an optimal logic? This is the best explanation. I've looked at this explanation and this explanation, nah, those don't work. This is the best explanation for what we have. Implications, okay, what does this mean? Maybe the writer will conclude with some implications. Well, what does this mean for, you know, teaching this in a language class, perhaps? So you can look at the logical structure. You can look at the research methods. Is it theoretical? Theoretical arguments? Theoretical evidence? Is it empirical, like qualitative data, where the writer is analyzing things as a whole, holistically, or dividing things into categories, maybe based on some theory, and then comparing them and coming up with some conclusions? Or is it quantitative? Numbers, statistics, statistical analysis? Is it some other kind of composite research method? Mixed methods, that means it's a mixture of qualitative and quantitative research in one study. Interpretive, like it's interpreting literature, it's interpreting social phenomena, it's interpreting something based on a theory for deeper insight. Is it critical or evaluative? You're critiquing, criticizing, evaluating a program, critiquing racist language in a person's speech, the way they talk. Is it applied? Just taking, okay, this is a research that some other people have done, they've done hard research. I'm just going to say, okay, how would this apply to teaching this in a classroom? This is, empirical research that somebody has done in linguistics about this grammar structure. Okay, well, they've done that. I'm just going to talk about, okay, how would you apply this to teaching in a classroom? Applied research. So you might come across applied research in language education. You could do style analysis. You can look at the word choice. What kind of vocabulary do they use? So is there a lot of technical vocabulary or some? Is it a lot of technical words, a lot of words that are just used differently in that area? Is it just words that are unique to that field, very technical words unique to that field? Is the vocabulary very technical? Is it very abstract? Are there a lot of like technical words from Latin and Greek? What's the style or tone? It kind of goes along with the vocabulary choice and the word choice. The word choice and the style, does it require a lot of previous knowledge of the field, a lot of theoretical knowledge of the field, a lot of theoretical conceptual terms, or is it fairly like more kind of direct, concrete words that are not too hard to understand? And then the style or tone, is the writer trying to sound very formal or authoritative? In the word choice and the style, what things does the writer do to sound that way? Is the writer trying to persuade the reader? Is the writer trying to inform the reader? Is the writer trying to be more friendly and practical to the reader, like I'm here to help you type of tone, or more like this is my argument for why this has to be? Is it more authoritative, argumentative, and such? Formal, semi-formal, what's the style and tone, and how does the writer accomplish that? Verbs and verb tenses, what kind of verbs are used? A lot of modal verbs, a lot of technical verbs. Tenses, is the writer using, at different parts of the paper, is the writer using present tense because the writer is talking about general facts or theories and theoretical descriptions of how things are, or looking at past research, is it written in the present tense to say this is what we know now because of what people researched back then? Past tense, maybe this is what people did. People looked at this question and they did this, they did this. Is it kind of past tense to like report what people did? Kind of more narrative style. Sentence structure, complex sentences, simpler sentences. This can vary from writer to writer, but generally do people in the field write very complicated, complex sentences or simple sentences? You know, what kind of sentences? What does that do for the style and the tone and the flow? Logical connectors. Do you see a lot of connectors like but and however or since, because? Is there? And that goes along with the logical flow and the paragraph types. The connectors, the connector words like but, since, if, whereas. Do you see are there tendencies in different parts for the connectors and maybe the paragraphs to be more like contrast comparison, but however, or more like cause result, like thus and so? Are the paragraphs more like result paragraphs? Is it more like process paragraphs? You do this and this and this. Paragraph types, descriptive paragraphs, narrative paragraphs, analytical paragraphs, trying to break things apart and explain why things are. Creative style, is it more like trying to put different things together into something new, what we call kind of synthesis, synthetic kind of approach to the paragraph style. The logical flow, from point A to point B to point C, what's the logical flow? How does the writer accomplish it? Those are some things to look at. And not just the style, but in terms of, okay, what does the style do for the writing? Do people use this style because it fits well with a qualitative paper, or it's a good fit for a quantitative paper, or an interpretive paper? Why are they using some of these style elements? So style elements for the purpose of better understanding the whole purpose of the paper, what the writer is doing. Why is the writer using this kind of style? In terms of, say, the type of research used, or the way the writer is trying to connect with the reader, the way the writer is trying to persuade the reader, the way the writer is trying to inform the reader. Why? Other ways to approach it, this might be a little bit harder. How would a scholar in the field do research on this and turn it into a published paper, or what do you think the writing process would be like for the writer doing this paper? So imagine, try to put yourself into the mind of the writer. How do you think the writer maybe started this paper? How did the writer maybe identify the research question or the main idea? How did the writer go about maybe gathering evidence or data, or in developing her arguments, and getting her data or her support, her evidence? How do you think the writer went about doing this research project that led to this published paper? How did the writer write this paper from start to finish? Put yourself in the writer's mind and try to think, how did the writer get the research idea, the research topic, find evidence, and then write it up into a paper? What do you think the writing process was like for the writer? So kind of from start to finish. And again, talk about the research type or the style or the argumentation and how the writer developed it. Bit more complicated, how would you describe the field's paradigm and how people do research in the field, and how is it then written up? That's going to be a little bit harder to do. The other video, probably the next video, will be kind of more focused on the paradigm and the research methods. So you don't have to do that, but that's one way to approach it that might be a little more challenging, but perhaps a little more fun, a lot more thinking and analysis. But talk about the field's paradigm, the theories, what people have to know, what people are trying to do in the field, and as a result, well, what kind of research do they do? Why do they do that kind of research? And then how do you write it up? And how does the paradigm and the research, like the qualitative research or the quantitative research, well, how does that affect how the paper is written? If it's quantitative research, the paper will tend to be written in a particular way, probably. If it's qualitative, it's going to be written in a different way. Well, why do people write like that in the field? So the paradigm, the research methods, the research approach, why people do it, and then how that gets written up, how people turn that into a full research paper. I have at least one writing sample that I will share in the LMS that will show that kind of paradigm approach. It's one that I wrote, a sample I wrote. It's not perfect, it's okay, but it's about psycholinguistics, psychological study of language. And it kind of focuses on the paradigm and the research methods and then how people write it up. I will also provide some other samples that are kind of more represent the other approaches I've just talked about in this video. I'll put those in the LMS. So altogether, I'll try to find two or three writing samples and post them in the LMS of the genre analysis paper. General tips. In this, you're being descriptive or analytical. You're describing how people write papers in the field, or analyzing and explaining how people write papers in the field. You're not being prescriptive. So prescriptive means you are telling people what to do. You should do this, you should do that, you have to do that. You are not, of course, an expert and not in a position to prescribe or order people or say you should do this. That would not be a very academic tone for this essay assignment. You're describing, analyzing, or explaining how people write papers in the field based on your analysis. You're looking at, a couple of papers like this. Focus. In the book, lots of guiding questions. In this video, I've talked about several different kinds of approaches or ways you can tackle this, or several things you could look at. Don't try to do it all. Focus on what you find interesting. What's maybe helping you to understand the academic writing process better, or if you're explaining this to someone else. Imagine you're explaining this to someone else. Okay, what would be most useful to explain to someone else, or for me to learn myself about how to write papers in this field? Clear focus. Refer to examples in the two papers that you should have. In your essay, refer to papers sometimes as examples. The writer does this and this. Summarize, briefly summarize examples. When I say, the writer is using this kind of style, these kinds of verbs, cite a few brief examples, or this is an example of how the writer develops an argument. Summarize briefly the argument like the ABC of her paper, from like the thesis or the research question to the conclusion and how the writer supports his or her thesis. Summarize, examples. Do not cite like long blocks of text. Don't just dump a long direct quotation from, that paper, because I can, go to the journal myself if I want to read it. I don't want to read like a whole paragraph from this paper plopped into your essay, because that's often a lazy technique. Students just throw in a paragraph long direct quotation from a published paper and they move on, and they don't explain, okay, why did you put this in your essay? So I would advise against long quotations. If you're going to have like a long quotation, you should spend at least as much time explaining, why did you put this quotation in your paper? Why is it there? What does it show? So if I were to, in my essay, if I were to put in like a 4-line direct quotation, 4 lines, from a paper here, well, I should spend enough time to explain, okay, why did I put in a direct quotation here? What's it there for? What does it show? I don't want to just plop it into my essay to fill up space. If you have direct quotations, spend enough time to explain, what does this direct quotation show? What does it show, in the genre analysis? You should use in-text citations. So if you look like in, these papers, these published papers, they cite other sources and they have a certain way of doing it. We haven't talked much about citing sources, but you cite the source. So if I am looking at a paper by, someone named O. The last name is O. If I'm doing this for my genre analysis, I should cite Ms. O's paper in my essay. In the same way that she has cited other sources, I should follow the same style and cite Ms. O's essay, or Mr. Kim's essay, Mr. Kim's research paper. I should cite him in the same style that he has cited other sources. And then at the end of the paper you have kind of like the, if you can see it, see this at the end of the paper, it lists all the sources cited in this paper. In your case, you just need two, the two published papers you have looked at. Follow the same style that you see here in your papers. You may not know exactly how to do it. We haven't talked about that yet in this class. You can follow the same style and just imitate the style. So you're going to have the in references or works cited or bibliography at the end, okay, like this, where you cite the two papers that you used for your genre analysis essay. So that is basically how you will do this assignment. Again, the Google Form assignments will help you to prepare and generate some ideas by answering some specific questions, and should give you enough time to maybe get the results back to you, and you should have enough time then to do the midterm essay. Again, I will be available during regular class time in Zoom, at least at the beginning of our class time. I will be available. I'll kind of probably log into Zoom here in week 6 and week 7, maybe even during midterm week. I'll let you know in the LMS announcements, but I will be available if you need to contact me through Zoom. Like during class time, I will be available, or you can email me and ask for a Zoom meeting if you have questions or problems. And I will provide some samples in the LMS, some sample genre analysis papers. The next video or two will kind of be a little more disorganized. It's a video from last year where I talk more about the kind of the paradigm in the research methods. If that doesn't help you as much, it's okay. This video here was maybe more helpful. Hopefully it's more organized. But it still might be helpful just to understand the paradigm of your field of study. And then another video will, maybe that video or another video, will go more into technical academic vocabulary, kind of expands on some of the things we talked about in our previous class. And then maybe for some sections of this class, maybe a video on style or some style issues maybe. Depends. But anyway, pay attention to the LMS announcements for updates on course sessions and stuff. For this video, of course, refer to the unit in my book on genre analysis. There are a number of guiding questions that may help you. Some of them may help you. Don't try to answer all of them. There's a lot. But pick the questions that seem helpful to you or relevant to you. It's up to you to maybe identify the focus. What do you want to focus on in your paper? And some guiding questions in the book. Some of them may be helpful for maybe your particular kind of focus or approach or perspective to this. So that's it for now. Good luck on your essays, and I will kind of, well, you'll see me in the next video. I won't see you, but you'll see me. And I hope to see you sometime later in Zoom or somewhere, somehow. So until then, good luck and take care. Goodbye.